Okay, here's Jolie, and I just sent that I just put on the meetup that we're about to get it started, so to stay tuned. So I posted that into the meetup page itself. But yeah, Jolie, as soon as you can get us up on YouTube, I'm going to start doing the tweet post too.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, and also if we can get the YouTube live notification changed. Yeah, we have 13 people on here now. Okay, great. And I'm just going to check to confirm I see myself live. Just wait one more moment. Yeah, I'm not seeing it live yet. Jolie, is there anything you have to do with changing that time setting on it? Because I still don't see it appearing live. Sure, okay. Yeah, that's cool. So just so you know, Richard, we got people from Atlanta, Sonoma, Perth, Western Australia, New York City. So we've got people in the chat here coming from
nice.
all over. That's cool. Yeah. Okay, I see we are live. Great. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today or tonight, depending on wherever you are in the world. We're really happy to have you at our August presentation for Accessibility Virtual Reality. I'm Thomas Logan, and I am one of the hosts of the meetup. We also have Meryl Evans here, who is on our chat on YouTube and will be monitoring the questions that come in for today's presentation. So as again, a reminder for our event, we are always seeking to ensure our event is inclusive and accessible. We welcome your feedback on how we can make our events more accessible and available to you, especially when we go into components where we go into virtual reality and have discussions together. We want to say thank you and acknowledge Mira by Night, our captioner today. So we have human captioner providing captions for all of our events. And we also want to say thank you to Jolie McPhee from the Accessibility Special Interest Group for the Internet Society of New York for our live stream. And all of our events are available on YouTube. For those of you all here with us today, you are joining us via YouTube, so we thank you for being here. We will take any and all questions that you have on the YouTube channel. And at the end of today's presentation, we're also going to move into a Mozilla Hub space. So if you would like to meet with our presenter today, Richard Hoagland, he will also be able to join the Hub space afterwards, and we can have some live chat and participation. And again, I want to thank everyone so much for coming today. We're really excited for this topic, designing for bodies, accessibility in VR. I met Richard Hoagland this year and have been so impressed with the work that he and his company are doing. And I'm looking forward to handing it over to him and letting him share the great stuff they're working on. So take it away, Richard.
Thank you, Thomas. I have to say, this is my first time presenting on Zoom and then streaming to YouTube. So I don't know exactly how this is working, and I intentionally did not turn on YouTube so as to not confuse myself. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and if you would just let me know if it is not working. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Is there something I should be doing?
Meryl, can you promote Richard to co-host? Thanks, everyone. You know, this is live and here on Zoom. So we, we used to have you all join us here in Zoom, but because of Zoom bombers, that's why we've done that. And Richard, now you should have access to share your screen. You have co-host permissions now.
Oh, there. Okay, there we go. Okay. Thank you. And let me pull up my slides.
And your screen is coming through great.
Okay, great. So first of all, hi everyone, and thank you for having me here today. I'd like to thank Thomas and Meryl and everyone else for providing me this opportunity to share our story and our project. And I hope that people will have some to be able to pull some valuable information from it. I will go ahead and apologize that when I was testing and practicing today, I found myself going on a few tangents and decided to write everything down. And so I might be reading from it more than I would like as a presenter, but I wanted to make sure that I focused on what was important and not to go on tangents. So my name is Richard Hoagland, and I am an entrepreneur, a virtual reality developer, and an experimental artist. I am an entrepreneur by choice, but I actually started as an entrepreneur by chance. After developing my first video game with a friend and collaborator, we went to sell it and realized that we needed to create an LLC in order to do so. And that's actually how I co-founded my first company. I now do it by choice as the founder and CEO of VRTogether. And I've been developing virtual reality and augmented reality for 10 years now, since the DK1 came out with a Kickstarter, I think, purchased by the DK1 by Oculus. My background is actually with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in New Media. And this experience and work as an experimental artist, I find very valuable because, at least for me, it helps me think about technology in a way that I find fruitful. I like to consider technology like virtual reality as it is as a medium, and about the affordances that that medium provides. As I mentioned, I'm the founder of VRTogether, an evidence-based virtual reality platform to reduce social isolation and loneliness in senior citizens and other vulnerable populations. Our vision of VR Together is to provide meaningful social interaction and shared experiences between friends and loved ones to build new memories. We're primarily funded through a National Science Foundation SBIR grant, as well as a grant by the state of Kentucky, which is where we're located in the United States. Additionally, we were fortunate enough to win a prize in a meta competition last November around their augmented reality technology that has helped fund this project to date. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, share a brief history of how we got to VR Together as a concept and some of my past work in virtual reality, and then discuss a specific case study around accessibility that we had as developers. So in 2015, I led a small team in developing a prototype called Daydream Blue for a competition that Oculus had, Oculus Mobile VR Jam, excuse me. The idea behind the prototype was that if someone was lying on their couch and it was raining outside, it would be nice if they could put on a headset and feel like they're lying in the grass with a clear blue sky. This morphed into a whimsical camping adventure with UFOs and a pet robot. You can actually see in this screenshot 2 individuals once we added multiplayer, and a pet robot named Ralph that would play fetch with you, which I feel like is pretty common for game developers. You start with an idea about laying in the grass and you end up with UFOs and robots. We were fortunate enough to win a prize in that competition, and that provided funding for the rest of the game. And we launched on Gear VR, which, if people have been in virtual reality for, I guess, around 7 years now, then you'll be familiar with the Gear VR, which was a headset that you put your Android device into. After we launched it, we launched multiplayer, implemented multiplayer, and at that time there were a few multiplayer experiences in VR. And what notably set out to me was at one point I was actually traveling in China, and my team shared one of the headsets with my partner back in Kentucky. And I was just floored at the feeling of being physically present, next to them in a way that Zoom and telephone calls didn't feel like. And it really was pronounced when I took off the headset and thought, oh my gosh, I'm back in my hotel room in I think it was Shenzhen, China. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So that idea bounced around in my head for a while. And in 2020, I was meeting with some friends and researchers where actually one individual from anthropology was talking about social isolation and loneliness it being a significant challenge for various populations, and that there was some literature about it. I don't remember at the time how much was in VR, but there was some around Second Life and teleconferencing. And I've been reading the work of folks like Mel Slater and Jeremy Bailenson, which I think has some really fascinating research dating back the last 10, 20 years around presence and embodiment in virtual reality, body illusion, and some really fascinating research. So it seemed to make sense to extend some of these concepts to multi-users in virtual reality. So I began researching isolation and loneliness, and I was overwhelmed by how much it impacted people's health and happiness, and also kind of embarrassed about how little I actually knew about the condition. And so with a lot of hard work and working with some amazing folks over the past year and a half, we went from that initial grant to where we are with VR Together. And so the current state, we're currently completing our phase 1 research of VR Together. And we, on Thursday, will finish our 3rd pilot with the senior care facility. And here's a screenshot of what the avatars look like in VR Together, as well as the background. They're actually holding hands, which is some of the initial work we did on top of our social layer, was to focus on social interaction. So some methods of interacting with another person to build that feeling of physical proximity and presence. I now have a short video to share. This video is admittedly about 6 months old, so the graphics have changed quite a bit. We definitely need to add a new video, but this does give an idea of the platform, and then it was produced to give an idea for Children's Hospital. So the tone is a little bit playful and whimsical, just to give you an idea of why we produced it this way.
It's fun to get your arms around, fist bump with each other. This is much more fun than just talking to you on the phone. Yeah, I can grab your hand. Of course. This is really neat. This is really neat.
Oh, no, don't play again. Okay. So the video is a bit of a marketing video, but that's where we are. So where we are now, here's a screenshot of one of the experiences that we're building. This is a Paris Cafe experience. And this was designed based off feedback from the pilots that we've been running in 2 senior care facilities. The experience is a presentation of a series of works by Parisian artists by a narrator, while up to 4 people sit in a cafe together as virtual avatars. So we're now actively developing experiences and play testing those experiences with end users. So over the past year, we've interviewed around 175 folks in senior care, seniors themselves, and then folks in some additional fields who have expressed interest in VRTogether, as well as expressed challenge of isolation and loneliness in either themselves or the population that they serve or the individuals they serve. So we've come to consider that there's a group of folks we believe share similar circumstances: lack of agency, a static environment, low stimuli, loneliness, and low social connection. And our vision for VRTogether is to reduce isolation and loneliness for these groups. And we found that these groups also share a significant accessibility needs. And so in terms of defining the core pillars of our technology, we've identified accessibility as one of those core pillars. However, the team is virtual reality developers coming from games. We're not accessibility experts. And so for the rest of this talk, that's where I want to talk about some of the things that we've attempted to do, the challenges we face, the struggles and mistakes that we've made, and kind of our lessons learned. And this is all around our implementation of supporting gaze-based input in addition to utilizing controllers. And this has to do with a game that we developed, an activity we developed called Dot to Dot. After completing our National Science Foundation initial research and technology development, we began designing our first activity in preparation for pilots we were at the time trying to line up. We were aware that our audience was unfamiliar with virtual reality and were most likely not familiar with games and controllers. And in general, many folks have a different, I would say, relationship to technology than I have, or my team has. So we set out to develop Dot to Dot, an activity that we felt would be approachable and enjoyable to senior citizens. And the concept is fairly simple. It's based on an activity called Dot to Dot in the US, where you draw lines from one number to the next on a sheet of paper. And when completed, there is an illustration, a line drawing of an object. So our version of Dot to Dot has users move their controller in space to guide their pointer finger from one sphere to the next numbered sphere, dragging lines to connect these dots until completion. Upon completion, the outline turns into a 3D model, which is then placed into the world to expand the richness of the world, ideally. And I have a video to show the example of this input and interaction. So the goals that we wanted to accomplish by supporting two forms of interaction was, we had defined accessibility as a core feature of our platform, but we weren't experts and we didn't feel knowledgeable in what that looked like. So by focusing on implementing one feature, we felt like we could define and build an accessibility feature in order to understand what in order to understand how that would impact development. Two, to understand what an accessibility framework might look like when supporting multiple features. And then three, to support users who wouldn't be able to utilize a controller. And so without that support, would not be able to play the game. And one other thing that was interest to us is we were quite focused on building interactivity so that people could do things together. And by supporting two methods of input, two users could interact on a puzzle together, which we found quite exciting. And so our gaze-based input method is based on where a user is looking in virtual space. Anyone familiar with the Gear VR days of virtual reality will remember many games that had gaze as an input method. We decided on this method as while not every user would be able to benefit from this form of input, it did provide a method to interact for those who couldn't use controllers, including collaborating on an experience together with those that could utilize controllers. In the gaze-based input mode, the user looks at the dot, and then to look at another dot, the line is dragged, similar to how the line is dragged to the next dot. So I think that's a bit hard to explain. So I'll just jump to the next slide, which is a video that shows the two forms of input.
Richie, do you mind adding like a quick audio description of what was shown in the video, since there's not audio, just to describe what was displayed there?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I will pause before it goes on to the next one and just describe the first half. So in the first half, a user, it was from the perspective of the player, and using their controllers, they were guiding their avatar's hand and with their pointer finger extended. So they were dragging on a dot to the next dot to the next dot. There were about 21 dots. You drag them in order from 1 to 2 to 3, etc. And when completed, it created a tent that then populated the environment they were in, which is a forest scene. They're sitting on a bench and there's a small stream running past them. Now it's going to play the footage. That was the controller-based input. Now it's going to show the gaze-based input. So it's the same environment and scene, but instead of using their controllers, the individual is just moving their head and their headset and looking from one dot to the next in order to connect them together. And similar, they're going through sequence from 1 to 20. It actually is going to make a sound. Yep, sorry, that's my apologies. That was actually a bug we need to fix in the software that triggers that effect. So the tent has now been created and moves into the environment. And so the activity is the same. It's just that the method of input, how to drive the experience, is, if with controller-based input, is driven by the Quest controllers for that device, and otherwise it's driven by where the user is looking in the headset. So the challenges that we faced a lot of challenges. First is that ensuring support under tight deadlines with limited resources is hard. We're a startup small company, and so we're constantly facing tight deadlines and limited resources. To compensate and ensure success, we try to remove all unnecessary work and development from our sprints, our every 2-week kind of check-ins. This led to multiple decisions to not support gaze specific for a new feature we were adding to dot into that 2-week session. And while in any given 2 weeks, this maybe wasn't an issue because we weren't play testing dot to dot in those 2 weeks. And so it didn't have much ramifications to push it off. The action of pushing it off that's why, in my experience in the past, features, whether accessibility or not, never get implemented. And so I realized, and we realized as a team, that if we're not careful, we're always going to find reasons, or potentially find reasons, to push this off due to these deadlines and constraints, even if we've identified it as core to our product. And second, we struggle to consider the ramifications of supporting 2 modes of input. So gaze support involved losing some of the affordances that we had thought about in order to assist in guiding the user and giving them feedback. So haptics, the intuitiveness of saying, oh, just move your hand from here to here, for somebody who's able to do that, and then the existing knowledge and skill that one has. So when we consider how to communicate with a player or provide feedback, we consider the affordances we have to utilize, like haptics. And additionally, when we consider how to make an action more intuitive, or to help teach or guide a user, we try to look for actions and concepts that they're already familiar with. And so we found that we had to think about this in 2 different ways, supporting 2 different input modes. And some of those ways were different because the affordances changed going from controllers to where you're looking. Third, in turn, having to come up with different solutions to different options, as well as additional design and programming and playtesting time, meant that supporting the multiple input methods did increase development time. And so combined with those tight deadlines, it was hard at times to see a path forward because it was really important for us to implement both these methods of input, but we were pulled against the reality of trying to get something in, say, that week, to have individuals be able to play test it during a pilot in a manner that wouldn't crash and just not work. Another challenge that we faced is that we didn't have access to individuals to play test who would be the end user of the feature. While we were making some of our decisions, we had not yet been able to start any of the pilots, as we were learning how long it can take to get pilots up and running, meaning we didn't have the voice of the end user while we're making the decisions. But to be fair, we did not need pilots though, and we should have put more effort into finding playtesters and others to provide feedback. And then finally, we had to develop additional UI elements and systems and support to toggle between hand-based and gaze-based interaction. And this also contributed to longer development time, as after support for gaze was added, we still needed to add a system to turn it on and off. So I think there's a lot of lessons we still have to learn and a lot of things to still work through in understanding more and more about developing these features and adding to input methods. But there's 3 lessons learned that I feel are definitely come to the forefront when we think about it. And the first is that because of the challenges always pulling on the development team's attention about trying to get things done by specific time with a small team and generally not having enough resources, we have to continue to bake accessibility into our DNA, our development DNA. We have to constantly review our core pillars and make decisions based off those to ensure that accessibility is part of the process. Otherwise, we stand to continually push it off. And then the fear is that we would add it as an afterthought, which I think is generally not successful. Many of those lessons are the second lesson learned is that these lessons are not unique to accessibility in our experience as developers, but just challenges of software development. But it does seem like accessibility does make it on the chopping block, unfortunately, quite frequently in software projects. And finally, to ensure that we're choosing the right accessibility features and implementing them correctly, we need the voice of the end user and experts during the design, development, and iteration phases. And it's almost embarrassing to say this because it's probably so obvious to everybody on the call, and not being an expert, I can still say, yeah, that's very obvious. But in a given week to week, being in the weeds of development, it's easy to forget what should be very obvious concerns and strategies and processes that would make it our project and our software better anyway. We're just trying to get done with something in a given amount of time. And so we're not even sure we picked the correct feature to get started with. When we started play testing with individuals, there was struggle around the clarity of the dot numbers that we were able to fix thanks to that feedback and an update. But then we also found that individuals struggled with depth perception. And so it made the game challenging for them, and we hadn't even considered that. And so, because we designed our activity prior to the pilot, we lacked their voice to inform our decision-making. And furthermore, it's possible that this whole thing that I've been describing is an over-engineered solution. So it wouldn't be the first time that I've done this. Perhaps there's simpler solutions than to have a group of programmers who aren't experts in this field try and think about a solution in isolation may just, yield over-engineered results. So looking forward, what we're planning to do now is that now that we've discovered our challenges and considered our lessons, first, we want to enforce in our project the support of gaze-based input across all interactions. So if you can pick up an object, that should be supported by gaze. Any action that can be performed across all of the activities has that support with 2 different methods of input. And we believe that by doing this, we can develop a process to constantly factor in future options and to build these considerations into our as I said before, development DNA. I have no idea if it will work. One thing that I'm excited about in presenting here today is getting exposed to a lot of individuals that I imagine have far more knowledge and experience in this space than we do. And that hopefully by just sharing the trials and tribulations of a development team, it could inspire some of that conversation. And then second, we look to, along those lines, we're hoping to develop strategic partnerships with accessibility experts and end users to have their voices included. To this end, we're pursuing some various grants and funding options to try to alleviate some of the pressure of resources inherent in building a startup business and technology. And to this end, we are really excited to have been in conversations and collaborating with Equal Entry and Accessibility towards providing intergenerational experiences inside VRTogether for Accessibility patients to reduce isolation and loneliness. Based on our experience in developing software, running pilots with care facilities, and then collaborating with the University of Kentucky, utilizing their research expertise and learning from them in research, we feel like combining the skills of the three groups is going to be a very fruitful collaboration, and certainly will allow us to really enhance our software and our understanding. So I have one final thought, and it's a little bit theoretical, but it's something I think about a lot. So I just wanted to share. So I think a lot about how if virtual reality is inherently an embodied medium, and there's a lot of emphasis on leveraging all of the senses and the full body when people talk about different tracking methods and utilizing sense and sight and smell and touch to drive experiences. And then I found that in research, the significant aspects of virtual reality like presence and co-presence and immersion, they a lot of times show increased levels when you utilize more controllers and more senses and more data to pull the person into the experience. And just from our little bit of research, it feels like this direction to make really engaging virtual reality content has some tension to accessibility, in that it's like the ideal user would be able-bodied, able-minded, and ideally like an average-sized individual. And I know I've been guilty of when I think about developing VR projects in the past, that's been my thinking. And so I don't have, I just wanted to share it because I think about it a lot and I wish I had some answers to it. But I found that I struggle with it a lot. And I've in the past many times not even recognized that by doing that, I'm making a decision about the accessibility of the software, even though I'm not aware of it. So that's my presentation. I thank everybody for listening. I hope that there's been some valuable information in our experience in our project and what we've done around accessibility and attempting to provide multiple forms of input. Again, my name is Richard Hoagland. I'm the founder of VRTogether. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to chat, share information, hear feedback or ideas, criticisms. My email is richard@vrtogether.us. We like to say it .us. And you can go to our website. It's https://vrtogether.us. I will say that our website is currently undergoing a huge revision, and will change a lot, and hopefully that'll be up soon in the next, say, month. With that, thank you again, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll give it back to you, Thomas.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard, for the excellent presentation. I wanted to start off one of the questions. Yes, it's awesome to see, a company of your size, like putting accessibility into the forefront of the thoughtfulness in your design. And as you mentioned, I totally concur that it's, even though maybe it's known, very often developers don't listen to the voice of the user as part of the design process. So that's a really welcome point, I think, always. I was curious on the controller base, which is what you discussed is the first place that you started for, looking at adaptations. Is there any work done now on with the users that you test with to ask them their preferences ahead of time, or to identify which type of design might be better for them? Or are you trying both designs with like everyone that you're trying the system with? Just curious how you're approaching the fact that you do have two input mechanisms.
Well, I will admit that our approach has been okay at best, in that what we found, and I'm not sure how much it was conveyed in the presentation, is how much we were struggling to get things done in time for a pilot activity session. And what that meant is that we kicked a lot of things kind of down the road a week that we just need to develop a better process to not do that. And so what we found was we were testing everybody with dot to dot without gaze-based input, because it was not developed in time. And there was ultimately, I think, coming from me, there was a lack of communication and the importance of supporting both. So from a development perspective, you only have so many things to do that week. There was a decision made to get it in. And I'm trying to figure out how best to have those kind of design pillars always front and foremost. So when those decisions are made, even if I'm not around, that it gets put as a top priority to fix. So when we finally did have gaze input, we started asking folks if they would like to try it, and started just getting initial feedback on it. And that's where we're at this point.
Excellent. Now let's take our next question from YouTube, and thanks everyone. Please keep getting the questions in on YouTube. I'll be asking them for you. So we had a question: what limitations do hardware headsets have right now that, if removed, could improve accessibility in VR?
Oh, wow. Well, hardware limitations. The first thing that comes to mind for me is, because we're primarily working a lot with an elderly population, we initially we did use Quest a lot because, well, it's a really nice device. It's also was cheaper to develop on initially. And then Pico is a more open device, but there's a lot of things that we want to do to make it much easier for someone who's not familiar with the technology to still be able to experience the technology. And that has been really difficult because depending on the platform, it's not terribly open. So we have an admin interface on a tablet such that another individual can see into the world, can help. They can do pretty much everything, so that the individual could just put on the headset, or someone else could put the headset on them and then experience some content. But even then, we find that there's a host of challenges in how unfamiliar the technology is, and just getting it working, making sure that it's in the right state, because it's hard to see what they're seeing, and get them into that experience. I feel like that's maybe an okay answer to a really good and very kind of big question. But I would have to think about other hardware limitations. I mean, certainly there's issues around vision. Audio based, it only goes up so loud, but you can use headphones, although it becomes another challenge depending on the user's familiarity with the technology. There's a lot, I guess, of visual based challenges right now. Like, a lot of individuals' glasses do not fit, depending on the headset you're using, do not fit inside unless they are able to purchase custom lenses. Then they're unable to see. Things like that. I guess vision seems to be an issue that we encounter a lot with people. It seems like it's an okay experience for them, but definitely not optimal because of something like it's blurry and it's a little hard to see inside. They can't wear their glasses, things like that.
Great. Next question. What kind of feedback have you gotten from people about the holding hands feature with the headset and the hand controllers?
Well, it ranges from thinking it's really neat and kind of, I don't know, I'd almost kind of call it like they find it endearing that they can do that, to like, oh, okay. So it depends. It depends on the individual. I would say the biggest issue for us is, and this goes across, I guess, everything we've been doing, and could be a whole nother talk on the subject, which is because a lot of the people that we're play testing with or piloting with or having tried the product, and also who we want to build for, are not familiar with virtual reality, or not familiar with game controllers. There's a lot of challenges to get them or have them hold hands. So we developed a system that seems so apparent. And I say that like with a smirk, because it's so many times as a developer, I've like, yeah, this is easy because I've been doing it for a month straight. And then I give it to anybody and like, I don't know what's going on. But it's been a challenge because we made assumptions foolishly. And looking back, like if a hand animates when it gets near another hand, that signals that there's been kind of a change. So then they can pull the trigger and hold hands. But for somebody not familiar with gaming, their hand changes and they didn't do anything, and they're just hung up on why my hand is changing. So I would say the feedback has been that we need a lot of work to make it much easier to do the hand holding, but the hand holding itself does seem to be something that people enjoy and appreciate, and we're happy to have included it and to got that feedback. We unfortunately don't have much scientific data. We've been running in research, but I don't think we have any specific data on hand holding, partly because it disrupts the sensors that we were using. But that's been the feedback so far.
And that's great. I'll just acknowledge we have about 10 minutes left, and we have a good set of questions coming in. So we'll try to get to all the questions that we have here, but obviously if we don't get to your question, you'll be invited into Hubs, and we can continue the discussion afterwards. So the next question for you, Richard, are you looking into how more realistic avatars can be incorporated into your platform? And they're saying, I'm thinking the approach Spatial and others have taken regarding digital mapping of an individual's face.
I'll try to be more succinct with answers to get through more. We've talked about it and we're interested in it, and that's where we are right now. We are very interested in an automated system, and we looked at a couple of third-party services out there. What we found was that the ones that were currently available have a lot of diversity of look, but not of age. Now I think they're actually coming out with, or have come out with, I need to check back, a newer version. But that was a big factor for us because pretty much everyone we want to generate an avatar for, well, if they want to look 20, 30, 40, that's fantastic. We also wanted to make sure there's a representation for them. That being said, if you look at our avatars now, there's not a lot of representation options. It's on the list if we want to address it. We don't exactly know our path forward, I guess, on that.
That's pretty cool, though, that I guess maybe not counterintuitively, but maybe potentially intuitively, these companies had thought, oh, we don't need to design for this type of avatar. And it's like, no, actually, there's a lot of uses for having avatars that encompass a wide variety of ages. So that's interesting for people making those systems to consider, think about.
Yeah.
Next one, have you found anything to help users that experience vertigo, or do you just use a monitor to have a flat experience?
I wish I had a great answer for this, because I feel like this is a big issue in general with virtual reality in between motion sickness and vertigo. No, other than this kind of the standard, I guess, standard practices that I've picked up over the years, such as the biggest is try if there's so a lot of our experiences are stationary, in that we're not moving them at all, and then if they are moving, to have it be a continuous velocity, so there's no turning and no acceleration, as that tends to be much more, I guess, the way the inner ear works. That's what's actually detected in the inner ear is the acceleration, and so that's when, at least with motion sickness, happens. I'm not personally that familiar with the difference between motion sickness and vertigo. We have encountered some folks who have vertigo and experienced vertigo as a condition they already had. And we just started learning that with our pilots going into facilities. And so we don't have any solutions or ideas really at this point about what to do, how best to go about that.
Great. And just mention Meryl Evans at Equal Entry's written an article around the comfort ratings and some of the ideas in the platforms on how that can be addressed, and some of the limitations currently with using comfort ratings in the stores that exist. Next one, how did you handle colorblind users, or maybe how have you considered colorblind users?
So we haven't yet. So the gaze and input difference was our first accessibility feature that we implemented. I guess it would be important to say, so other than running our research in the lab as part of the phase 1 research, we didn't start piloting with individuals other than friends and family until I think 2 months ago. So there's a lot of things that we need to implement that we haven't yet. In terms of our plans, we've got a bunch of those accessibility. That's one that I feel like I could be wrong, but it feels like there's a decent amount of information and content out there. So we were primarily going to leverage what people had already learned. Like I read recently a really nice article that you all are probably very familiar with from Alchemy Labs about how they use patterns and shapes as well as color to be able to differentiate if somebody couldn't, if color itself was, in order so they wouldn't, color itself wasn't the differentiating factor to be able to kind of read a scene.
Excellent. All right, we're going to do 2 more questions, and then that will be it for the live stream here. So next one, I'm going to combine 2 of these questions, just hopefully to get them in. How easy, difficult would it be to allow users to use adaptive controllers, maybe considering something like the Xbox adaptive controller? And is there an alternative to controllers for someone with quadriplegia? Just kind of, I think, just adaptations again on input.
So that's a really interesting question. If you're doing PC VR, then I think there's, assuming you have development support, I feel like it's pretty wide open in terms of adding in support for various input methods and controllers. When you go to the all-in-one headsets, I think there's much more limitation, although with Pico, which I admittedly am not as familiar with as I'd like to be, there may be more options. And what's challenging that I never really thought about until just now. So we want to do all-in-one VR because we're considering a lot of challenges and accessibility around specifically the elderly individuals. So we are bringing headsets into a facility. We want, and we ask people to sit in a chair. We put, once they've learned and they're comfortable utilizing it, we put a headset on them so they don't have to do anything and they can still have the experience. And then all the controls are with our tablet, so they don't have to learn about UI, especially or any sort of methods of input. So it's really nice to have a standalone headset to be able to run these experiences with a number of folks in the facility. However, we give up all sorts of opportunities because one of the things we found pretty much immediately is with the controllers, we would like to potentially 3D print modifications to the controllers because ergonomically, it's not very clear how to hold them. And so people will try to hold them in a lot of different ways. And we feel like if we could modify it slightly, they would, it might be more clear as to a specific way of holding them. So we feel like it's a give and take about what we can get out of standalone versus all of the customization with a PC-based system.
Excellent. And our last question for tonight or today is, could it allow people to give permission to move or to be guided around? So I guess some type of mechanism to assist people for a guide or a way to, if they have trouble manipulating or moving, to be paired with someone.
Oh, yes. And I'm trying to think if we've talked about that or I just experienced it in another application. But somewhere along the way that came up as, so if it's a scenario where if a user is not familiar with the controls, then a staff member can utilize this tablet-based interface to do things. And one of the things we want to build in is the ability for the staff member to do something like, if they're comfortable and say, are you okay with moving, to have them move. And we recently added that administration system into VR as well, so that you don't need the tablet if it's not necessary. So I think it would be very interesting, and definitely the kind of things we want to do is to add that ability. Because our idea along those, that is, since we really want to focus on multiple users, it's to give all sorts of abilities and controls to somebody who's familiar with the technology to then help another individual if they are with another individual who is not familiar with the technology and would struggle significantly with things like just navigating a UI menu because they haven't used VR at all or very limited amount.
Great. Thank you so much. So let's say thanks to everyone that has come to today's presentation, especially to you, Richard, for the excellent materials and for the work that you're doing to make an application that can be used by so many people. I want to let everyone know YouTube actually doesn't let you drop hyperlinks into the chat. I've learned that from a few times. So if you would like to continue the discussion and try out a virtual environment, Mozilla Hubs, I'm going to share my screen really quickly to show the process. I have placed the hyperlink on our meetup page and in the chat for Designing for Bodies, Accessibility in VR. The link to this virtual world is here, hubs.mozilla.com, A11yVR project. When you click that link, you're going to come to a screen where you can come in and join room. And so we will be, Richard and I at least will be in this room and available to chat for a little bit longer. We will not have our amazing captioner. So if you are someone that would like to ask questions not via voice, there is chat functionality in Mozilla Hubs, and we will be using that in the space. I want to say thank you to Jolie McPhee from the Internet Society of New York for getting us streamed up on YouTube and for always making sure we have an excellent archive of the presentations. I want to say thank you to Mira by Night, our captioner for tonight's presentation, and for always the excellent work in providing captions for our events. I'm Thomas Logan from Equal Entry. I'm looking forward to seeing you at our next events. We already have the next event for September planned, and we'll be posting that soon. And we'll invite you to join us there. Thank you again so much to Richard Hoagland from VRTogether, and come meet us in Mozilla Hubs. Yeah. Thank you.